introduction, Heather. And yeah, as Heather pointed out, from 13 countries, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name's David Pope, I'm the Marketing Director for Jumio in Europe, and today I'd like to share with you the results of some research we did into how fraudsters steal identities before they go on to use them to conduct fraud against e-commerce operators, online gaming companies, online marketplaces, and pretty much anyone who they care to target. So today, if I may, I'd like to tell you very briefly who Jumio are and why we've done this research, and then I'll get straight into the research, and then I'd like to finish up with a bit of an overview about how Jumio can stop fraudsters coming to your site. So who are Jumio? Well, we call ourselves a computer vision company, and what we mean by computer vision is that we think it's really old-fashioned these days to have to type your information into a website when you want to transact, buy something, create an account, especially these days when you're using your smartphone or your tablet, when things are a little bit more fiddly and difficult. And so these days we think that our increasingly clever and shiny devices should do all the hard work for us. So as such, at Jumio we create computer vision technologies which we integrate into our clients' sites or our clients' apps. So then when their customers come along and they want to buy something, they want to create an account, they want to transact, all their customers need to do, whip out their payment card or whip out their driving license and hold it up to the camera on their device or their webcam, and computer vision will see and scan and validate data and carry it into the transaction, making it much neater and quicker for the customer, making it much quicker for the merchant to welcome customers, and at the same time offering a really clever fraud prevention technology as well. So anyhow, more on Jumio later. Let's talk about this research. So this research is from a white paper that can be downloaded from the Jumio site called the Fraudsters Playbook, and of course we'll send out a link to it afterwards to everybody that's registered for today's webinar. And in this research we sat down with some convicted ex-fraudsters and talked to them about how they did identity theft. And the reason we focus on identity theft is that, well, because when you read about fraud in the papers and the media talk about fraud as one homogeneous process, but it's not. It's actually 4 different acts, 4 different stages. And so the first stage, of course, is stealing an identity before one then goes on to do fraud with it. The second stage is the act of fraud, namely the act of defrauding the merchant, the classified site, the online marketplace. Then the third act is taking delivery of the goods or services obtained through the process of fraud. And finally, the fourth part of fraud is the profiting from those goods or services that one has obtained through the act of fraud. So what we've done with this research is just to focus in on the very first part of the act of fraud, namely how the fraudsters steal identities before they then go on to use them. And so from the fraudsters we spoke to and a bit of desk research, we identified 5 ways in which fraudsters steal identities. So this isn't an exhaustive list, this is just some of the more interesting and illuminating insights into how fraudsters steal identities. Some of them are high-tech, some of them are low-tech, and so, right, let's get straight into it. Here's our 5 ways in how fraudsters steal identities. So, the first one, which we call the coffee shop Wi-Fi hack, is actually a pretty simple exploit, but there's a bit of technology involved. And what the fraudster will do is they'll go along to a coffee shop and they'll broadcast a Wi-Fi hotspot from their own device. That could be a tablet, could be a laptop, but what they're going to do is they're going to name that Wi-Fi hotspot that they're broadcasting with exactly the same name as the real Wi-Fi network in that coffee shop. And of course, it needn't just be a Wi-Fi hack in a coffee shop. It could be in a sports center. It could be in an airport lounge. It could be in a shopping mall. So it could pretty much be anywhere. So then the customers will come along to have their cup of tea, their coffee, and they'll log on to this fraudster's hotspot instead of logging onto the real hotspot, and they're not to know the difference. And so, surprise, surprise, the fraudster has got some malware lurking inside this Wi-Fi network that allows the fraudster to see the devices that are connecting to this hotspot and allows them to see the activity that's taking place on this device, and enables them to walk around inside this device as well. So the legitimate customers could be there sipping on a nice cup of coffee and a nice latte, and they'll be checking into their social media, they'll be reading their emails, and particularly in their emails, the fraudster will then see emails from their financial services providers, from wherever they do their grocery shopping, or from wherever they transact online, and immediately the fraudster can see usernames. Then at that point, the fraudster is going to access that machine's internet history and look at the different sites they've been to. They're going to have the username, and then they're going to use a piece of software called Cain and Abel to hack that customer's password. So Cain and Abel was originally invented as a piece of cryptography software to help system administrators recover lost passwords. More commonly used now for more nefarious means by fraudsters to hack people's passwords. So the fraudster is amassing a whole range of information on each of the people whose devices that they can see. And it's very rich data as well. The minimum information that fraudster will want to commit identity theft is name and address and date of birth. But here the fraudster is getting access to lots of usernames and lots of information from online banking, social media and online shopping. Personally, I find it very interesting that when my sites, sites where I transact on email me, they're happy to hash out all the sensitive credit card information, but they're not hashing out username information. So I think this is an area where we can all improve, actually. So the fraudster we spoke to here says that, yes, this is a high-tech group, but he likes to use low-tech as well. In the summer, when the weather's better, this fraudster will go out and steal bank statements and letters from people's post office, from people's post boxes, but mainly in areas where it's high-density living, so there's a lot of post boxes in one place and can get easy access to them. But the fraudster prefers this exploit, prefers the Wi-Fi hack exploit, because of the rich and deep data it gives him to his victim's financial identity. So from the high-tech to the low-tech, this is called the local government census, and it's quite an elaborate contract, actually. So what the fraudster is going to do, he's going to get a gang, and he's going to work as a gang to target a neighbourhood, a series of streets, to carry out a fake local government survey. But what they'll do is they'll select a particular neighbourhood, and what they'll do is they'll put leaflets to the letterboxes the day before to lend an air of legitimacy to this census. And the census isn't in the leaflet itself. Instead, the census is in the form of people calling round to the neighbourhoods. So the fraudster has a gang. They're working it street by street, but cleverly, what the fraudster will do is he'll handpick his gang to match the demographic of the neighbourhood. They'll be fully dressed in suits, looking very immaculate, very official. They're going to have badges, they're going to have letterhead to announce their bogus credentials. So at this point, the fraudster is really building the exploit, really building the con that's about to take place. And what they'll do is the agents, the local government survey agents that are knocking on the doors, they'll play quite a clever card. And what they'll be doing is saying, oh, we've come to understand how you can get better service from your local government for your money, and what other services we should be providing to your area. So if show me any taxpayer anywhere in the world who doesn't have an opinion on how their government or the local government could be spending their top tax dollars a little bit better, well, I think, to be honest, most people are going to open up about that subject. So by playing the race card, by playing the local government card, by paying the value for money card, the fraudsters actually get a quite high success rate in terms of walking away with the details they need to commit identity theft. For this exploit, the fraudsters figured on a 1 in 4 success rate, but of course they wouldn't just be walking away with name and address and date of birth. They'd be walking away with link of tenancy, names of other people in the household, email address, and other data points that they need to go on to commit identity theft. So the fraudsters here says that each member of his gang would hit 200 doors a day, and so with a 1 in 4 success rate, they're walking away with 50 fresh identities every day per person who's working this particular exploit. So let's then have a quick look about how the fraudster industrializes this exploit. So here's a little schematic of how the gang is constructed. Very much a division of labor sort of thing. So right at the top we have the master fraudster, and the fraudster owns all the identities that are harvested through this particular exploit. Commonly what the fraudster will do is to keep half of the identities and use them for their own further fraud exploits, and sell the other half on a cardsters, a carder forum, a chat room where fraudsters go to talk to each other and sell each other information. But anyhow, more on that particular exploit later. But to put the fraud together, the master needs a handful of trusted captains. These captains, they're also known as the 10% men, because they get paid an overall percentage of the master's fraud activities, and it's their job to recruit and brief and manage the foot soldiers. And the foot soldiers, they get paid on a results basis. So they'll get paid £5, €10, etc. for every identity that they obtain. So this is the industrialization of fraud. Not all fraudsters work in gangs, but one of the ones we spoke to was extremely efficient at how he put together his frauds and really took them to the next level in terms of the reach and the scale of them. So the captains, of course, would coach the foot soldiers, which houses on which street to target and which ones not to bother with. The ones that look slightly dilapidated they wouldn't touch. The ones with a nice car on the drive they'd go for, because they felt that was a good proxy for how much money that particular household had in the bank, or more to the point, what sort of credit rating they would have, and therefore have access to a larger line of credit. So there's some real targeting we can see going on here in terms of who the fraudsters are choosing to do identity theft from. So from the low-tech back to the high-tech, let's talk about social media. So there's obviously a lot being made of social media in the press about how it's great for fraudsters, and perhaps as a society now we do give away a bit too much information about yourself. So with that word of warning, what I would say is please don't put your date of birth on your social media profiles. It's making life easy for fraudsters. I would also say don't even put your year of birth. One particular exploit a fraudster will use, of course, is to start to talk to people, and once they can see their year of birth, they then need to find out the day and the month. So the conversation might go along the lines of, oh, you know what, I bet you're a Pisces, aren't you? Oh no, I'm a Libra. Oh, no way, my sister is a Pisces, she's the 17th, what date are you? And so just with a little bit of engineering, it's actually relatively easy for a fraudster to elicit day and month of birth when they've already got the year from the profile. Anyhow, onto this particular technique in social media. So the fraudster is targeting a fictitious character called Brian, and so the fraudster is befriending Brian on a social network, talking to him, getting to know what he's like. But what he's actually really interested in is not necessarily in Brian, but the fraudster is interested in the people on the social network that display the most information possible about themselves. So the fraudster is actually looking to find out the people that display lots of information about themselves, and they're the people he wants to do identity theft on. So to get close to them, what he's going to do is going to create a new fake account for Brian and reach out to Brian's connections that he really wants to impersonate and say, oh, hi, it's Brian here. I've lost access to my social media account. Can you please connect to this one now? So at that point, the fraudster's targets are connected to the fraudster Brian, and at that point, the fraudster can really see as much or as little information as he wants to about his targets. So that could be when they were born, where they live, where they're educated, their educational achievements, who they're employed by, their history in terms of likes, but more interestingly, how they spend their time and money. So that's what the fraudsters really want, because that's then the stepping stone to get the next piece of the identity theft puzzle, which is the payment card number or the credit card number. So what the fraudster would do here is use this information about what they like, where they go, who they hang out with as an angle, a way in, and then they're going to decide to impersonate a brand or retailer that the person is said on their social media account that they like, or that they spend time or money with. And so typically the fraudster would look at what venues and places, bars, restaurants that they've been to, then call up and pretend to be them, and it'd be, oh, so Mr. Pope, I'm afraid we charged you too much money when you were with us last week, so we need to put a refund onto your card today. We've just finished up our accounts. And so at that point, the poor legitimate customer is going to think, oh yeah, fine, yeah, I'll have the money back on my card. Here's my card number. Is there any refund? No, of course not. But that's a great way for a fraudster to get some identity details via social media and then top it up with a little basic fraud trick. One of the comments that one of the fraudsters made is that it's perfectly possible on a social media network to walk through that network to find their mother's maiden name, and that they couldn't believe that banks still rely on this piece of data as a security check. What we also learned is that fraudsters are very targeted in terms of who they do identity theft on. And so the fraudsters' favourite targets on social media are males born between 1960 and 1975. And the reason for that is that they're old enough to be active in social media, but not old enough to be internet savvy enough to protect themselves. Plus at that age, they've spent a lifetime or half a lifetime paying back bills and building up a really good credit history, and therefore have a good line of credit. And at that time of life, they're still economically active, and therefore they're a little bit more time poor, which makes it a little bit easier for the fraudster to go on and con them and try and steal their identity. So that's a good insight that fraudsters are very, very targeted in not just the sites that they target, but also they're targeted in terms of who they're going to do identity theft on. So this is probably the most low-tech trick we came across, and we called it the offer that's too good to refuse. And all the fraudster needs for this particular exploit is a phone and a phone book, and it's going to call people up and pretend to be from a major supermarket. And at that point they're going to say, oh yeah, so hi Mr. Smith, we're just calling a particular portion of our loyal cardholders to offer them a discount on the next few shops. It's just a test program, so we'd like to wonder if you'd like to participate in this, at which point the target's ears prick up and think, oh, okay, how much is the discount? And then at that point the fraudster's really going to make their target an offer that they can't refuse, not in the Godfather Marlon Brando sense of the word, but what they're going to do is say, yeah, so we're going to offer our loyal cardholders 50% off the next 3 shops, and all we need today is to take a small payment on your card, sir. So at this point the target is thinking, well, I could gain this. What if my next 3 shops are larger than what I normally pay? I could make a real killing on this. So of course not everybody falls for it, but you can almost imagine the dollar signs pinging in the target's eyes, and the way that the fraudster puts it together in terms of the language, the tone of voice, and the sort of customer service oriented nature of the call, it's actually quite a compelling exploit. In fact, you can actually listen to it on the Jumio website. This is from a fraudster called Tony Sales, this particular insight here. And there's inside the white paper, there's a link in the white paper that takes you to the Jumio website, and there you can actually hear Tony Sales pretending to call somebody up and go through this little routine. It's worth listening to. It's very insightful in terms of the language and the content and the positioning. It's just very believable. It's a bit scary, as a matter of fact. So the fraudster says that they like this technique because it's quick and easy. All they need is a phone, and it has a high success rate, and it gives them card details they need to go on. And one of the cheeky things that the fraudsters might do at that point is then to use that card to pay for a mail redirect on their target's name and address. And funny enough, the amount of money that the fraudster quoted in terms of the advance payment for the discount on the future shopping is the same amount of money as it is for the mail redirect, so it doesn't look suspicious on the statements. And at that point, the fraudster then starts to take control of the flow of post that's coming to this fraudster's house, which leaves them free to apply for mobile phone accounts, car loans, whatever they want to do in terms of the next stage of the fraud. And the fraudster, of course, then gets up early in the morning and just delivers the pieces of mail they want to deliver back to the target's house. So onto the Carder forums. So there's been much made about these in the press. We've seen a lot of them recently. The Silk Road being one of the most infamous, and of course, you also read about how the FBI and the UK's National Crime Agency shut them down, but no sooner are they shut down than another one crops up in its place. But here's a little screen grab from one of the Cardiff forums. And so here, this is where the fraudsters meet to sell each other identity details, card details. And so in the screen grab here, we can see that the fraudster is selling all the different card details, broken down by different country, and it's a volume-driven model. So the more people buy, the cheaper it is per unit. And these cards are also graded in terms of gold and silver and bronze, and that relates to how often these card details have been sold before, and therefore how much value might be left on them, or therefore how likely it is that the legitimate owner is wised up to the fact that the card details are compromised. But what's really interesting about these card forums, though, is that it's not just the card details that are being sold; it's people's time and expertise. And on these cards forums, there's a whole range of different actors and subcontractors who provide their specialist skills. So right in the middle here, we have the carder. That's another word for the fraudster. And for fraudsters to go about their business, they need identities, of course. So how do they steal identities? Well, they work with bank data stealers who will target people's bank data. And to do that, the bank data stealer needs to send out millions, thousands of millions of emails to try and fish people and fool people into replying back to their bank to say, yes, here's my card details for the security reset or something. And in order to do that, the bank data stealer needs to be aware of what particular loopholes might exist in terms of banks' different processes. So they'll need vulnerability finders to probe and test the systems. And then in terms of how the fraudsters might get their money out, they'll work with people who will use their address as drops. They'll need people who will carry money around from one place to another. So it's actually quite frightening, the extent of the underground economy that's actually on these websites. And this diagram is borrowed from a great piece of research that was done by some criminologists at Southampton University. The name of the paper is underneath, and it's well worth a read. So that was a brief tour of the research that we did in terms of how fraudsters are going to target identity theft. So here's a bit of insight into how you can stop the fraudsters from coming to your site using Jumio's computer vision technology. So first of all, the great news is that 9 times out of 10, when a fraudster is doing card fraud, they don't have the card, they just have the card details. So they might have got the card details off a carding forum, they might have got the details by calling up and pretending to be a local supermarket. So in other words, to ask the legitimate customer to proceed and transact by initiating a transaction with an image of their card is good, but in terms of how the fraudster would react to that, well, it's a fantastic deterrent. The fraudster's going to think, oh, okay, screw this, I'm going to go and transact somewhere else where this particular defense isn't in place. So this is NetSwipe. This is Jumio's card scanning and validation service. But what we also find here is that this turns out not to be just a fraud prevention tool, but a fantastic way to help customers transact within sites and on apps much, much quicker. In fact, what we found that we're not just solving the fraud problem, but we're also solving a payment friction problem. And when we did a bit of research, we found out that 2/3 of people are regularly abandoning transactions on their tablets and their smartphones, and the abandonment is a little bit lower for desktop, but still astronomically high. And so it's funny when you look at this this checkout form here. So e-commerce is 20 years old this year, and in that time, everything has changed. The whole world has changed. What we buy has changed. Where we buy has changed. But one thing stayed the same, which is the checkout form. And so that's one of the things that at Jumio we're really seeking to disrupt. And it needs disrupting because people are abandoning because the checkout process is taking too long, or the card entry is too difficult, or the purchase isn't going through because the screen isn't optimized to the mobile platform they're transacting with. So what we're finding is that we're also using computer vision so people can scan their data instead of typing it. It's reducing payment friction. So how is that working? Well, here's a sample checkout process, sample mobile checkout. So we always say to our clients that give your customers the choice of typing in their data the old-fashioned way or choosing to scan it. So there's a little subtle button here that says auto scan card with camera. Customer presses that. That wakes up the Jumio technology, which is of course embedded into the app or the website, so the end customer doesn't have to download anything. Customer gets out the payment card, holds it in front of the camera, and in less than a second, the Jumio technology will see and scan in the 16-digit card number, issue date, expiry date, and if the customer name and account number and sort code is present as well, and our client so wishes, we can also extract that data. And then at that point, the customer has to enter their CVV code, press submit, and then that transaction is off for payment. Now, it's not Jumio's job to do the payment. It's Jumio's job to get more customers to the payment stage as quickly as possible and to minimize abandonment, to minimize dropout. So why is this working as a conversion, as an abandonment reduction tool? Well, what we're seeing is that it's much quicker to scan a card than it is to type it out. In fact, it takes 55 seconds on average to key in card data versus 5 seconds to do a scan. So we're going from a 55-second to a 5-second process. And the quicker the process, the easier it is. And the quicker and easier it is, the less people abandon. The less people abandon, the more people complete. And the more people complete, the more revenues we see coming through our client sites. So when we put this live on our clients, on average, they experience an increase in conversion, or to put it another way, a reduction in basket abandonment of between 18% and 33%. When we put it live in Travelocity, they experienced a 5 times increase in conversion between customers who were keying in the data and customers who were scanning their data in. So it's really increasing the number of successful basket completions that our clients make. And of course, it sets out the problem. It solves the problem that we set out to solve. So we see that customers that swipe versus customers that key in the data, on average, result in 67% less fraud-related chargebacks, which is quite a big reduction for one single fraud tool, of course. So then on to NetVerify. So NetVerify is our document authentication service. And of course, this is how we all used to verify, how we all used to assert identities in the days before the internet. We'd walk into a branch, show our documentation, somebody would look at the document, look at us, look at the document, look at us, and go, welcome, Mr. Paper. And really what we're doing is, at Jumio, is we're translating this process for the internet age. So what we're going to do is going to validate a document, but what we're also going to do is to do a face match between the customer that is in the webcam or the device device camera and the face on the identity documents. And we're going to do a comparison between the two. So, for example, I could steal someone's wallet, at which point I would have their identity tools, their identity documents, but I wouldn't have their face. So this is adding a new layer of authentication, going beyond the straightforward document validation as well. But here's a quick overview of how we authenticate a document in real time. So the customer has shown their identity document to the camera, and Jumio takes off the image, and we're going to check lots of different security features contained in the document. And we can do this for ID documents from 105 countries around the world. And one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to look at the layout. So let's say, for example, you have a UK passport issued in 2010. We know exactly what format that has to be, whether it be a Bulgarian passport, Romanian passport, Mexican passport, Bolivian passport, etc. So we know what layout it has to be in. And we're also going to check the font, and if the correct font has been used and the font is the correct size. We're also going to check what's known as the microprint. The microprint is the microscopic pictures of birds and bees in the background. Then we're going to check the hologram, that the hologram is in the right place and the right holograms. We're going to compare that document against a list of known forgeries. We're also then going to check the MRZ code, which is all the codes and numbers and arrows that tend to be at the bottom of certain driving licenses and identity cards and all passports. And there's some clever maths contained in that code. So for argument's sake, if your surname is Pope, you're male, you're born in 1980, for argument's sake, then that means the 17th character has to be Y. So there's some clever things to check to be able to authenticate an identity document. At the same time, we're employing a little bit of clever technology in there as well, basically some photo forensics. So what we see here on the left is a legitimately issued Spanish passport. And what we can see is the issue date, the expiry date has actually been changed, because when we then put it through the white light technology, through the photo forensics filter, we can see that there's been some pixel manipulation in there. This fraudster has been clever enough to change their data in the issue date, the expiry date, and also in the MRZ code at the bottom. So in terms of helping prevent fraud, so roughly speaking, using that verified chops identity fraud in half. That's what we found from our different clients. And at the same time, though, it's also not just about preventing fraud, but also about the customer experience. And one of our larger clients, one of our bigger fans, are Airbnb. And so for their online community, their online marketplace, where they have people buying and selling from each other, what they really want to do is create trust in the marketplace. And this is where tools like this come into their own for classifieds and online marketplaces. And that the greater the trust, the more people are going to transact. And if they can see that there's processes in place to make sure that members of this site, people selling to each other on this classified site, are validated and that they're real people that aren't going to go on and do fraud, then it creates that high level of trust and in turn creates a higher level of verification. So now if you go onto Airbnb and you want to buy a home, or you want to rent a home, or rent out your home, you'll go through the process whereby Airbnb will say, can you please can you please show your identity document to the camera? And at that point, Jumio will be there behind the scenes doing the identity document verification. So some of our clients are in the online gaming space, and the interesting thing there is that what they found is that it really helps speed up the customer acquisition process, the customer welcome process. And for a big gaming site like Mr. Green, for us to be able to speed up the customer verification process by 400%, that's quite a big thing for them.
You can't do it. No. You can't separate the process.
So the other product that we have, of course, is called FastFill. Sorry, I can just hear a bit of background noise. I'm just going to work on my interface to see if I can put somebody on mute. Hold on 1 second for me, please. Okay, Shay, I think it might be one of my Jumio colleagues. I think it might be Peter in the office, but I think I can actually hear him speaking. So if you can try and mute him in the background, or Peter, if you can hear this, if you please mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have him muted, so I think it needs to be on his end.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Shay. Okay, so just on the theme then of speeding up the customer welcome process. Well, what we see here is that this is a great thing to be able to speed up the customer welcome process. The speedier it is for the customers, the more customers are going to complete their action and complete that sign-up process. So FastFill is another product that helps speed up this process. So FastFill will basically extract data off an identity document and populate it into the customer sign-up process. And the quicker we see this happening, the more people will complete. And so here it is in situ again. Customer chooses to scan their identity document instead of typing in the data the old-fashioned way. And depending on which kind of document, it could be in less than a second, or it could be in about 4 or 5 seconds. The data seamlessly appears in the customer sign-up fields. And of course, this works for identity documents from just over 100 countries around the world. So I'd just like to finish then on a bit of a topical discussion about wallets and mobile wallets and one-touch payments. And this is obviously something that's very, very popular topic at the moment. And we think that it's important to make the experience for the customer as easy as possible. And the easier it is for the customer, the greater revenues our clients will enjoy. And so Jumio Port is a service that enables customers to port their details into a transaction using the infrastructure that's already based on their device. So this isn't a new wallet. We're not creating a wallet. Jumio are creating functionality that merchants can use to help their customers transact much quicker. And so what we're going to do is by helping customers to store their information on their phone, in their Apple Passbook, or in their Samsung mobile wallet. So here's a shot of Passbook. Now, most of the time people's Passbooks are just filled up with boarding cards or coffee shop loyalty cards, but really it makes sense for your Visa details, your driving license details to be stored in there as well. It's actually more secure than it is if it's sat in the back pocket in your wallet, because your wallet doesn't have a PIN code to get into. And so what we see is that here's a particular example transaction. So we have here a fast food app, and the customer comes in, buys their fast food, scans their card details, and then can have the option to save their data to Passbook. So that means the next time they come back, they don't have to type any data in, they don't have to scan any data. All they do is port the details back from Passbook. So port is Jumio's way of enabling one-touch payments, and that's got to be a fantastic thing in terms of encouraging easier revenues and easier customer sign-up as well. So here's the important information. Jumio, of course, are PCI Level 1 certified, and we take our redundancy and our encryption techniques very, very seriously. And we're available cross-platform on Apple and Android, on laptop, tablet, and smartphone as well. So here's a few clients of ours and some awards we've won recently over the last year or so. And so I think that's probably enough from me. And so Heather, I'll be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Dave. That's really kind of scary. I'm really paranoid now, I think, to go anywhere or do anything. Oh boy. So we have about 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat box, and then I will relay them on to David. But I do have a couple questions as I was listening to that scary information. When you're talking about the coffee shop hack, is there any way at all for us to know what hotspot is valid and which one is a fraudster?
As a consumer, no. There is no single registry of Wi-Fi hotspots. Yeah, that would be a very large undertaking to do, and I'm not sure who would pay for that. If you're the owner of a venue, then I guess would that be a coffee shop or a sports centre or whatever? I guess the onus is on you to keep checking what Wi-Fi hotspots are available and make sure that it's only legitimate ones. Aside from that, as a consumer, it is a risk that we face.
Yeah, that's so scary. Okay, my other question was regarding the checkout form, and when they're abandoned, is that an easier, I guess, are you an easier culprit than for fraudsters? If you just simply like start filling out and then leave it?
How do you mean, sorry?
I don't know, I guess if you abandon your checkout form, is that a place that fraudsters attack normally?
A checkout form, yeah. So the checkout, of course, is where the fraudster is going to bring into play the stolen card details that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so by asking the fraudster to initiate a transaction, they're not going to have the card. They can go off and make a card, but it's going to take them about an hour to do it. And the whole thing about fraud prevention is that the aim of the game is to make life so hard for the fraudster that it's uneconomical for them, and that they then want to go and do something else with their time or target somebody else with their time instead.
Right, yeah.
It's actually a technique called a meltback. And what a fraudster will do is they'll get an existing card, they'll get an ironing board, a tea towel, a piece of metal, a tea towel, then iron the card through the tea towel, piece of metal tea towel, and they'll keep ironing it until the metal gets hot and starts to push the melt the numbers back into the card, which is what's called a meltback. But it's quite time consuming. The fraudster it's quite a stop and start process. The fraudster needs to stop doing it and put the card in cold water to cool the card down before the whole card melts from time to time.
Jeez.
And then once the numbers are melted back into the card, the fraudster needs to then go off and get a machine to punch the new numbers that he wants to use back into the card. And even then, there's a degree of scarring that's quite visible anyway. So
I feel like it would just
possible,
be...
but it's a very uneconomical process for the fraudster to get off and do.
Yeah, I think it would just be easier to get a job. Does anybody else have any questions for Dave while we have him on the phone here? We'll give them a couple minutes. How about to think about it?
Yeah, one of the questions we get commonly, because this is quite a new technology, is well, how many people are prepared to use their device to show an image of their card or their identity documentation. And what we see is that when customers are given the option to scan the card, we see that just over half of people are happy to scan the card first time. And this is without much prompting, without much education. It's just a fairly subtle button within checkout. And then we see that when people have scanned the card already and they want to come back and do subsequent transactions, we see that 94% of those people are happy to scan the card a second and a third and a fourth time as well. So the take-up of it is really, really good. And what I see is that this way of transacting to make customers' lives easier is going to be increasingly the norm in the future. And I think that it's very much like when people first started shopping online. So back in the mid to late 90s, some people were like, "What? Put my card details online?"
Right.
We joke. So I think that increasingly we'll see these kind of technologies adopted to really make online shopping a quicker and easier and more mature process.
So when you take the photo, is it like taking a photo of the card? Does it like get stored into your phone?
So there's no actual photo that's stored on the phone. With the card scanning service, that's taken via a live video stream, and so no photo actually ends up on the device. With the document authentication service, that does use a photo, but as soon as the photo's been taken, we overwrite the photo, we obliterate the photo on the device, so there's no record of that photo ever having been taken.
Cool. That's amazing.
It's pretty cool technology.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And definitely something I see classifieds using more often here in the future. I don't see any questions from anybody. Last call for questions, if you guys have any. Otherwise, we could also send it to David's email as well, if you are more comfortable doing it that way. In the meantime, I want to thank you all again for joining us for today's webinar. I would like to extend a huge thank you to David for presenting this frightening information today, but so glad that we have a solution out there to help protect us. It's fabulous to hear. As I mentioned before, this webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to our website, and I'll send you a follow-up email within the coming days with the webinar recording link. Our next webinar will be presented by Associate Member Gravity R&D, and that will be held on Tuesday, May 6th, in which they'll be showing us 2 case studies showing personalized retargeting. And registration is actually available now, so you can go ahead and check out our website to get registered. And last but not least, we'd appreciate if you could take a minute to fill out the survey that you'll receive when you log out of the webinar. And David, again, thank you so much for hosting this webinar for us.
Pleasure.
Very much appreciated. It's great information. And we'll be
Thank you,
seeing
Heather.
you too at the conference, right?
Yeah, see you in Helsinki.
Great. Looking forward to it. Thanks all for joining. Thank you, David.
Thank you, bye.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.